better on the interview than I did on my mock interview. So that was a little surprising to me. I don't know why. So maybe I put a little pressure on myself when I'm practicing instead of putting pressure on myself when I'm in the real interview. But I recorded that. The guy said that I was allowed to record it, so I got that for you.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can definitely review that. Anything else you guys want to go over? Is anyone is their first call? Coma, is this your first time on this
Yeah,
call?
yeah, I'm actually turning on my camera in just a second, but yeah, I actually have some questions too. Um,
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, and then obviously Haley, I think this is your first time on one of these calls. This is just a free open Q&A
yeah.
for anyone that needs any kind of support. Sometimes we do call reviews, sometimes we review 1 minute videos, sometimes it's just a Q&A. It really just depends on what people need. So, Coma, you said you had a question. David, I know you had a interview that you wanted to review, so we could definitely take a look at that. And that's going to be fun because that's a real interview to look at. So that's always exciting. But yeah, Coma, hit me, man. What's up?
That's so funny because I have an interview in like at 4:30 for Closers.io pipeline.
Sweet. I can actually give you so much insight there because I used to work there.
Oh wow.
So I can tell
Yeah,
you exactly what they're looking for.
I've
Yeah,
I'm in their pipeline. Um and
sweet.
I've gone through like 10, 11 interviews, but I've only been invited to one follow-up interview, which is like kind of weird for me because I feel like I have some decent experience. So um
Okay. Yeah. Well,
maybe
we could take a look at, like, you're saying you only got one. Are you saying interviews that you got from their pipeline or just in general?
no, like I've gone 10 interviews from the pipeline, but I've only been invited to like one-on-one.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah. What do you have so you already have like a profile in their pipeline, a 1 minute video in their pipeline, all that stuff?
Yeah, I'll probably redo it. I'll probably remake it. I've been in the pipeline since November,
Hmm.
so it's
Sure.
kind of taking a minute to
Yeah, definitely good to update it and stuff like that. But yeah, I'd be happy to look at your 1 minute video if you wanted me to, or you said you had some questions. What's up?
I mean, no, I'll probably just watch an interview prep stuff. Like they ended up booking the keep pushing the time back for this offer, so maybe I'll come on Wednesday. I believe you do one on Wednesday.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I'll probably do one on Wednesday. Yeah, because um I don't have too much time here, but I'd be glad to just sit here and watch or in like kind of in the background.
Sounds good. Anyone else have any questions or anything they want to cover before we jump into David's recording here? No, nothing in particular? Cool. Let's jump into it. David, tell me a little bit about this interview, man. What offer was it for? How do you feel like it went? Give me some background.
So the offer is for setting appointments. The method is a little fishy, but at the same time, I guess he's utilizing that method, and it involves utilizing multiple different accounts on LinkedIn and also on Facebook. And I think there are other social media profiles, but he didn't get into the details of that. But all it involves is simply, Maya, can you go to your mommy, please? All it involves is simply just messaging people. I got to either send them an audio or a video recording of a script that he's going to provide. And the whole point is to set appointments for their sales reps, which I'm assuming is just closers. I don't think there's any other steps between that, so that they can get booked to get into this accounting deal that he's running in his company.
Okay.
But as far as the interview, one thing that I did notice, but I wish that I would have had more time to work on, was that I have this tendency to think that I need to be a little more articulate than necessary or explain and give more detail than necessary. So there were points where I started to just not fumble over my words, but explain stuff exhaustively. And I caught myself doing that. And then there was also another point where I noticed that I sounded a little desperate by some of the questions I was asking towards the end of the interview. And what else? I think that's it. Honestly, I don't like the way I looked on the video because it was nighttime here. It was 4:30 a.m. and there was only some light bulbs around here, but it's all good. He said that my setup was nice. I had the black curtains in the back. I told him I ended up telling him things that I think I kind of regret because I told him that I was working on my office space. He didn't seem to be phased by that at all. I think that honesty is important to an extent, if you understand what I'm saying. But I guess we'll hear what you have to say.
Yeah, it also depends on the position, right? Because it sounds like it was a DM setting role, right?
Yeah.
So he's not going to care too much about what your office looks like if you're a DM setter. You know what I mean? If you're a
Hmm.
closer, you're going to be on camera talking to prospects. Of course, that makes a big difference. But if you're just a DM setter, it doesn't matter too much. But yeah, Carlos Haley would love to hear you guys' thoughts as we go through it as well. See if we can get him some good feedback. Let's open this up and take a look. Can you guys all
About
hear that?
your experience.
Yeah. Well, I actually do not have any experience at all, but right now I am investing in a course called.
So, first things first, I wouldn't open up that way, right? When it comes to your experience in sales, what you want to do if you don't have any official, like, high ticket remote sales experience, you want to just frame what you do have, right? So you don't want to just go in and be like, oh, but I don't have no experience, but I'm doing a course. I would, because you have like telesales experience, right? You've done some telesales, telecommunications. So I would just frame that and tie it back to the role and how that makes you a good fit for what it is you're doing, right? So instead
Yeah.
of starting it off just like in a 1 minute video, you never want to record it and say, by the way, I've never done this, I have no experience, but, right? Because they immediately assume things about you. They immediately make that assumption that, like, oh, okay, they like kind of disregard what you're going to say after that.
Yeah.
So I would jump in and say, yeah, so the my sales experience starts with X, or my sales skills come from this, or hey, I have done this and that's what's allowed me to improve my sales ability. Like, you want to frame what you do have instead of just
Hmm.
saying I don't have anything and then trying to kind of say but this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Let's keep listening.
The Closers College, and I'm learning a lot from that program. As far as the space, I've educated myself a lot on the whole sales process. I understand that remote sales is actually a real business that can help other businesses. We're pretty much like an intermediary.
And it's just like the language you're using, like you're just coming across as very new. You know what I mean? And it's okay to be new, but you don't want to come across as like, oh, I've never heard of this stuff before. It's so interesting to get into it for the first time. Like, you know what I mean? You don't want to sound that way. You don't want to come across that way. So afraid, like, refrain from using language like that where you're like, wow, this industry is very interesting. I'm just seeing some stuff about it. You know what I mean? Let's keep listening.
Between a business and their prospect. It's fascinating to learn about. I'm deeply interested in it because I love communicating with people, having conversations, and that whole idea of communication for business in order to actually get a sale highly excites me. Like, it's just really interesting. I've tried to get into remote sales before, but I don't think that I understood it as fully as I do now.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, yeah. And what is your goal?
And then last thing I'll say on that, the answer to that question, I always want to answer and tie like my answer through the lens of how it makes you a good fit for the specific role that you're applying to, right? So the role here is a DM appointment setter, and even though he's not saying like what makes you a good fit for this role, I want him thinking about that when I'm answering the question, and you can kind of force him to think about that by legitimately telling him that, right? So if he's just saying what's your or what's your experience? Tell me about your sales experience, whatever the question is. I'm going to say, this is my experience. You can say, this is what I've learned. You could say, this is what I'm going through in terms of training. You could say all that stuff and then ending it off with, and that's why I believe I'd be a really, that's why I believe I'll do a really good job when it comes to DM appointment setting on this role because XYZ. You know what I mean? Like, really just let them tie in that experience to the actual opportunity that you're applying for.
Well, my goal first and foremost is to, make a lot of money. But at the same time, it's not even driven by making a lot of money. That just seems to be a byproduct. My goal with this is to actually become the best sales rep that I can become, possibly. I understand that I can be a setter, I can be a closer. There's many different terms involved in this business space, and that somewhat confuses me. But I would like to be a full cycle rep because I want to understand all cycles or all parts of the sales process so that I can have a deeper understanding of what's just going on throughout the whole chain from the beginning of a prospect, finding an offer, whether he's coming through a lead magnet, and then finally ending up with the decision to purchase.
Okay, what are your thoughts on how you answered that? What are your goals question? You're on mute, David.
I think that I had the right intention by answering it honestly, but the second part of my answer, like re-listening to it again, kind of didn't make sense because I didn't tie in my passion because I am actually passionate about communication, and conversations. I love language and back and forth interaction. I think that's one thing I could improve on. It just like, did it kind of not make sense to you too? Because I think it's important to be honest about the money aspect. But when I said, what was it? I said, my goal is to become the best sales rep possible. I don't think that was absolutely true. And I think he might have been able to tell that.
Okay.
I think what my real goal with all of this is to actually find a job that satisfies me and keeps me interested and I'm passionate about. That's something I would change about, what I just said in the future.
Okay. Carlos, Haley, Julia, do you guys have any thoughts on how we answered that question?
Yeah, like what you just said at the end, that you're just looking for a position that you feel good about, uh, also that you want to develop your career, essentially. You want to keep on growing your career in this space. So I think it gives like long-term perspective for the interviewer.
Hmm. I like that. I like that.
I would leave the money part for like the end.
Oh
Or
yeah.
in the middle. I wouldn't like start straight away with this. I mean, it's kind of obvious that everyone that is in this career wants to make money, but it shouldn't be the first thing that you approach, in my humble opinion, when you start replying.
I actually agree with you. I can see how that benefit for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, all good answers. I don't think there's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, I want to make good money," but like Julia said, we obviously do. Um, the formula I kind of like to use when it comes to answering this question is saying, "Hey, these are the short-term goals. This is what I'm trying to do in the future," and but really tying it into how it aligns with the offer that I'm applying for, right? It's like, how does that fit here? And then, like you said, David, your passion for either the niche or the role or whatever, right? It's like, hey, my goal, like, what did you say your goals were again at the end there?
I said to become the best sales rep ever, to
Well,
understand the full sales cycle. That's what I
you're
said.
saying to find a company that you'd like be happy with working at. Is that what you said?
I don't think I said that yet. Maybe
Well,
I
no, but
did.
like on this call, like what did you said something like, hey, I should have said this. What was that again?
Oh no, I think that I should have just emphasized more so my passion for wanting to become a sales rep and why. And you said something earlier that would uh add to my passion, and that's the niche that I'm choosing with personal development. That's something that I could tie into my passion as well.
Hmm. Yeah, so I would have probably answered it something along the lines of like, hey, in the short term, I'm looking for a role that's like this. I think I would really enjoy the DM setting position that you guys have for these reasons. In the long term, I'd love to grow and progress with a company in this way. And if there is that alignment with like niche passion, like if you are really interested in accounting, then you could say that, you can add that. And that's how I kind of would have answered it, just because there's a few other things you put in there, like, yeah, there's lots of different positions I could do. Again, kind of really emphasizing the fact that, hey, I'm so new to this. This is brand new. I haven't really given it much thought. You know what I mean? So you want to try to again avoid answering in that way. Um, and again, that part where you have some passion for the industry, passion for the niche, you have passion for the way you would interact with people. Um, that part is going to be huge on these interviews as well. Let's keep listening.
Yeah. Okay. And can you give me an example of where in your life you showed a lot of discipline?
Hmm. Well, immediately, I remember when I was what was it, maybe 19 or 20, I was really interested in creating my own music, my own beats, hip hop, instrumentals. And I learned Reason, a digital audio workstation. I learned how to sequence the instruments. I learned how to edit and transpose different elements of different parts of the music process. I actually taught myself music theory. I'm actually really proud of that. I taught myself how to play piano, although not that well. And over the course of a year, I got to a point to where I could actually create really decent sounding beats. Taught myself how to do the mixing and mastering, and it was some effort, doing small bits of work here and there. But over time, I got to where I wanted to get, and then I did actually continue to pursue that. But I actually have been picking that up here and there slowly. But that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty good answer. And I would just end it off with something like, I'm the type of person that once I put my mind to something, whether it's a new skill or something I'm very familiar with, I'm the type of person who goes above and beyond to improve my skill set. And that's why I think I would do a really good job in this role. You know what I mean? Just kind of like tying it
Yeah.
all together at the end, you know? Just keep listening. That was a good answer though.
And what is a passion of yours?
Oh, a passion of mine? Ooh, ideas, innovation, um, building something that not only I'm excited about, but bringing that to people that want to use that product. Because in my mind, I understand there's this term thrown out there, oh, you're just an idea person, and ideas are only valuable if they're implemented. So, like, I'm still in that whole phase of my life where I'm slowly developing the courage to be like, well, Dave, let's go ahead and do this. You don't know what's going to happen. Let's build a team. Let's network with these individuals that are educated in these disciplines of knowledge so that we can actually create something. It seems, what's the best word to say it? Some of the ideas that I do have do seem impossible or seem like a stretch, but I don't know. It's just something I'm working on right now. But I just want to share that with you.
Yeah.
Definitely brainstorming, ideating, and possibilities. So
Okay.
And then when it comes to some of these questions that are kind of, I guess, not necessarily directed at the job, but they're kind of questions aimed at understanding you and your personality, I would still direct it in like in the role sense, right? So for example, if someone's asking me like, what are you passionate about? Maybe the thing that would be in alignment with the role isn't the thing that you're most passionate about above all, but you could still probably earn a little bit more brownie points by listing something that's the highest on that passion list, but closest to the role. Meaning, like, I know you're passionate about networking and communicating with people. Maybe you're passionate about helping people get clarity on what their problems are and maybe helping people solve their problems or helping people achieve their goals, or maybe you're really passionate about seeing transformations. Maybe that's something you care about, but it's not like number one on the passion list. But even if it was like number five, I would still like I would share that one instead of like, let's say number one was like playing soccer. Like, you know what I mean? I wouldn't
yeah,
share that one. I would share number five because even though it's not number one, but it's the closest to role alignment. Does that make sense?
no, that makes complete sense because I've been wondering how to answer some of these questions, and it was like I almost forgot that I was in an interview at certain times. But I think it's very important to, like you've been saying throughout this call, to tie in what I'm talking about into the role. I think that's very important. That's actually been the best piece of advice you've given me so far.
Yeah, because like I feel like what you're doing is you're taking the question at face value and almost separating the fact that it's an interview from it and just
Yeah.
like being like, what's the most authentic way I can answer this? Which is good to have that level of openness and honesty, but almost you don't want to have it to the point where your answer is not almost not relevant.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Anyone else have any thoughts or anything else they want to share so far?
I usually, whenever I get these questions on the interviews, I try to keep like main, three main passions, three main things, etc. I guess it's simple for the interviewer and it's good for you to remember. Also, you don't get like a huge list when people get lost. I don't know if Ty agrees, but It's something that I
I like
like
that.
and works well for me usually.
Yeah.
100%. That's good. And then like coming up with ways to frame what you said in a way that's relevant. So for example, you said you're passionate about like ideas, right? You can take that same thing and say, I'm passionate about coming up with creative ideas to do things like improve efficiency, to, in creative ways to have conversations with people, to, set appointments, whatever, just something that's super, super relevant so that people are like, oh yeah, cool. Hello, hello, Lisa. Thanks for tuning in. I know this is the time that you're at work. Thanks for popping in anyway. Let's keep going.
And what is something that
And then just before we take up too much time here, because, I just want to check
Yeah.
in. Does anyone else have any other topics they want to cover? Um, Other than that, we could just keep going along with this. But yeah, let me know, Julia. I know you hopped in after we started. Is there anything you wanted to go over or cover?
I have one, but it's a little bit personal, so I don't know if it would be the like
Well, what's it
the
about?
moment.
If you don't mind saying, like, what's it about? Like, how personal are we talking?
Yeah, I got an offer, so that's good news for Saturn. But I said the person that I would like to start in the 1st of April because then I can like structuring, organizing, finishing the course, and so on. Uh, and then like he added me, but on WhatsApp we are keeping in touch. But this was Saturday actually, but from there, uh, I don't know if that would be good, like to give this timeline because now he didn't reply to my messages and I'm worried that he's trying to find someone else.
Well, at the end of the day, if he needs to hire someone ASAP to fill a position, then yeah, he'll probably fill it with someone else in the time frame if that's, if he does need to hire ASAP. I mean, if you have the facility to like maybe take on the role part time and you can negotiate that with them, then you can definitely go ahead and do that. You don't have to wait if you don't have any reason other than like maybe doing some more training or something. I don't think that's a good reason to put it off. If you like the offer and it's a good offer and it's a good company, feel free to just get started. But if you have pretty set in stone reasons that like I need to start in April, that's also totally okay. And if you miss out on that one opportunity based off of just that, like it's not the end of the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, he's a headhunter as well, so he's always looking for a lot of
Okay.
for people for
Well,
opportunities.
yeah.
He told me that it was okay,
Okay.
like to start in the 1st of April. So
Well, all you can do is take people at their word, right? So if he says, "Hey, it's okay, the offer's still going to be there," maybe it is, maybe it won't, but I mean, it just depends. Like, do you have really good reasons for like, is it like do you have really good reasons for waiting for April or what?
actually, I wanted to finalize the training. I have a trip that's also kind of a business trip in the end of the month, and I am based like yeah, these was
Yeah.
the reasons.
And
So
only you can decide. Like, there's no right or wrong here. I mean, if you have to wait till April, then go ahead. That's totally fine to wait till April. If the opportunity's still there, great. If it's not, then again, it's not the end of the world, especially if he's a headhunter. It's you can always he'll have another opportunity eventually for you as well. So yeah, it's really your decision to make on that front.
righty, thank
Yeah,
you.
because like if you can't like if you're gonna have to pause halfway through because you have a business trip and stuff like that, then maybe it is best to just start after. But I mean, he did say it's fine. So yeah, all we can do is take him at his word. We can't assume he's lying, right?
All right. And one thing that I wanted to know from you, if this is also normal, he mentioned that we would start, get onboarded, and then sign the contract after the onboarding. Is that the industry practice? How usually this works? Do you know?
There, well, there's not really like and a solid industry practice. Because one thing you have to know is like a big chunk of these companies are there's a lot of startup culture. There's some bigger, more, set in stone with legal practices companies, but a lot of these companies are like, hey, I, did really well at this thing. Hey, maybe I've been a fitness trainer for a while. I decided to start an online program because I want to expand online, and I started running some ads. I hired one sales guy, I hired an appointment setter, and away we go. Now we're a company. So they're not like in this corporate, it's not like a lot of this stuff isn't super corporate structure. So I've been on offers where there was no signed agreements. And then there's offers where obviously they do have signed agreements. If you want one, obviously just ask for one. It's always good to have one so that terms are clearly defined for sure. But as for like before or after onboarding, like I don't think that's like a huge issue as long as you're not actually starting to work. Like if there is an agreement to sign, just make sure that you sign it before you do any actual work and you should be okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions? No, good to go. Cool. Anyone else have any other questions before we keep going with this interview? No, good to go. Awesome. Let's keep listening.
That you've been consistent with for the last 3 months?
Ooh, well, I'm a big fan of getting inside your head
What was
and
the-
You've been
what was the
consistent
question?
with for
definitely brainstorming, ideating, and possibilities. So,
okay. And what is something that you've been consistent with for the last 3 months?
ooh, well, I'm a big fan of getting inside your head and understanding the reasons
Interesting
why
question.
you are doing certain things in your life or why you're not doing certain things in your life. I like to self-diagnose myself and be aware of what's going on in here because I think it's very important. And sometimes we forget to really do the inner work in terms of how are we shaping our attention? How are we perceiving this? Am I limiting myself in this way because of a thought or an idea that I have about myself in relation to that subject? So I guess you can call this personal development. You can call this in the new age community, people call it like I guess belief work or law of attraction, whatever it is. But I think that everybody probably has a different word for it. It's pretty much just understanding how I am associating with the world, and if I'm letting myself be.
I would just say you're over explaining it. It was a pretty simple question. So what have you been consistent with for over 3 months? You could say like, hey, my personal development, I'm really big on improving my mindset in terms of leadership qualities or whatever area of personal development you've been focused on. You could have just said that and kept it pushing. I'd say we just kind of over explained it here to the point where we don't want to like confuse them, you know?
Be limited by what I haven't even tested out to figure out is real for myself.
Yeah.
I hope I articulated myself
Yeah.
the way you understood with that.
No. The thing is, beliefs create actions, and actions become your reality. So what you believe is your reality in a way. So yeah, nice. I see where you're coming from. And what do you think are the best and also the worst things that can happen if we work together?
Worst things that could happen. Well, immediately this came into my mind. I don't like the office.
Did he say worst things that could happen if you worked for him? Is that what he said, David?
Yeah, he said, "What do you think is the worst thing that could happen, and what do you think is the best thing that could happen?"
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Carlos, Haley, Julia, what do you guys think? Well, how would you guys answer that question? It's almost like a trap.
I feel like it's very similar to the what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses question.
Yep.
And I think a good answer. First of all, before I say this, actually, David, I just want to say that I really admire you for like putting your interview on here and letting us analyze it. That takes a lot of courage. I know that I've had sales calls that I've been on, reviewed, and it's just like, like your heart skips a beat while your face is on there. You're like, oh my God. So
I'm not even looking at
kudos to
myself.
you. Huh?
Oh, I said I'm not even looking at myself right now.
No, I get it. Yeah,
I will say
totally
it
get
is hard to just sit in the fire,
It is,
People
yeah,
rip apart any
So
type of call. So
so
100%.
I admire you. But yeah, I would honestly show maybe and Ty can I'd love to hear Ty's input. But the best and worst thing that can happen, I mean, I think it's rather obvious. It is a funny question. It's like the best thing that would happen is I would do really well, and the worst thing is that I wouldn't, and if I didn't, and I would actually show a little bit of detachment because I think that shows good sales qualities. So, and if I didn't, hey, I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to go to more sales trainings and I'd love to stay on this offer and get better and improve on this offer. But if it didn't work out, I guess I'd go to another one. I really don't want that to happen, of course, and kind of saying something like that, but showing a little bit of detachment because that isn't like kind of an interesting question. But I wouldn't say that to them. I would just say, oh, because yeah. So anyway.
100%.
Yeah, I've been asked this something similar before. It was more on the lines of what would make you fail in this role, and so basically, yeah, you can come up with a list, but you can also come up with how you can overcome that at the end. And I think this is something similar.
100%. 100%. Julia, did you have any thoughts or no?
No, I agree with both. First time I hear this question. Interesting.
Yeah, it's not a common one. I've seen it on application forms. Haven't really heard it much like asked in interview form though. It's an interesting question. I guess the one thing you kind of want to stay away from is blaming the company, right? Like you don't want to say, well, the worst thing that could happen is you guys lead flow sucks. Like, you know what I mean? You don't want to say something like that. Um, Although it could be true depending on like the role that they're hiring you for, but you don't want to start off like blaming the company. I think I like Haley's answer a lot of, I mean, keep it short, sweet, simple. Like, hey, I mean, worst case scenario, I don't perform, but I'll do this and this to make sure that I do. And best case scenario, I absolutely crush this role, which I believe I will, So yeah, not much else to say. Let's keep listening. Let's hear how you answered it.
Offer, I decide to just not talk to you again, and I don't give you any type of communication at all, which I don't think would happen at all. The best thing that could happen is that
I love David. I love the honesty. Like you literally brought up the worst thing you could possibly do. Like, what's the worst thing I could do? I mean, I guess I could just ghost you. I don't think I would do that, knowing me, but I guess if we're talking worst, you're so honest, like just from the heart. I love it. That was no, that's really good. Let's keep hearing.
this is going to be a great way for me to break into the remote sales space, to learn about how to actually coordinate with teams through Zoom meetings, to understand how to meet certain deadlines, to improve my skills, to get better, to be excited about the job, to have a hunger to learn more.
And this is all a good answer on like best case scenario. The only lens I would slightly swap it from was like break into the remote sales space. I would just say, talking about like performing well on the role. I wouldn't say like for me to learn about X. Like the company doesn't want to hire you so they can teach you how to do the job. They want to hire you so that you can perform in the job. You know what I mean? Because you're making it seem like, hey, your job's going to be my trial run, my test, and nobody wants to hire for that so that you can test out, hey, to see if this will work out. So I think it's a really great answer, just minus coming at it from that lens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome.
And be satisfied and proud of myself and my accomplishments.
Now, how many free hours do you have per day?
Well, 3 hours that I'd have per day, I would say between 8 a.m.
Time zone shift. Couple days.
Sure,
Time
probably,
zone stuff.
Yeah, maybe it's in a few days because I was scheduling a meeting with a prospect just to realize that the clock will change.
if you want to hire me, I can show you pictures of how it looks in different angles with
This is when you're talking about your
the thing is,
setup,
there's
I'm
just a few parts
assuming.
of my kitchen, which is my kitchen's
Yeah,
fine.
which if you're a
You know,
DM
it's no big
setter, I
deal.
don't think
They
he'll
understand
care
that I'm a
about
human,
really.
Yeah. Well, so we record. Actually, I will just dive in and I will just explain this to you a bit more. So first of all, you will get paid $30 per appointment you schedule. We pay out monthly.
And then it sounds like from here on, is he just talking about offer details and stuff like that? You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, that's pretty much what's going on. He's just filling me in on details of the job. I'm asking him more questions about the job. So yeah, that's pretty much
Cool.
it. Great advice though. Great advice. I feel like I've already improved just from hearing what you've said and everybody else has offered as well. So yeah.
Yeah, just some small changes, man. Like you have good energy, like when you're answering it, you have good confidence, right? It's just knowing what to say and how to frame it. I think the two biggest things is don't frame yourself as a complete beginner on these calls, and then just make sure that you're answering questions from the lens of how can I make this answer relevant to the position I'm applying for. If you do those two things, man, you're showing up really, really well. And then obviously, you're working on your setup, you're working on your background, your lighting, all that stuff. If you start applying for things like closer roles or roles where you're going to be on camera, that's going to be a little bit more important. But if it's just appointment setter roles where you're not on camera, it's not as important. So, yeah, man. Overall, like, thank you for sharing that. I know, again, like Haley was saying, it's tough to get reviewed in front of people. So, yeah, man, thanks for jumping on and sharing that, and looking forward to seeing the next one. Awesome. Um, any other questions? Anything else you want to go over? Joseph, I know you just hopped in, man. Welcome. Anything you want to go over, man? What's up?
While we're on the subject, I wanted to know what are the most common interview questions you see? I
Yeah, for
love
sure.
to.
For sure. So the typical ones will be like, tell me about yourself. What are your weaknesses? Why do you want to work here? What makes you the right fit? What are your goals? How do you handle stress and pressure? What motivates you? Obviously just give me your background and experience. Like, those are some of the typical questions you'll get on an interview, and those are the ones I'd say you should just, get on some interview mocks and get comfortable with. Um, yeah. Anyone else have any kind of typical interview questions that they run into?
Follow up on that as far as how do you I had one person who we were communicating via DM
Hmm.
and he asked to see my I guess KPIs
Hmm.
and I have some KPIs but I don't have things like there are definitely things that are missing like revenue, how much revenue I was able to generate for the company. How do you navigate around that when you're missing certain key KPIs that the business owner may be looking for?
Yeah, so obviously you could just send what you do have, and when it comes to the revenue you've generated for the company, I'm sure you could get a rough guess. Just lowball it if you wanted to specifically get a number. Don't highball it, just lowball what you think you generated. But at the end of the day, you really want to, it depends on the kind of way you're communicating, but you really want to come with some confidence there and say, hey, here's are the numbers I do have. But at the end of the day, if I'm applying for an appointment setter over the like a phone setter, I might say more than happy to jump on, do a role play, show you what I've got. I'm more than capable of, performing on this role. But happy to jump on and do a role play and show you. You know what I mean? So if I had zero tracking sheets to show, zero experience to show, I would lead with confidence. I would lead with, like, role play clips and recordings of me doing like an awesome discovery or an awesome pitch, and just show whatever I could show, you know? Right. And that's why I say it's like really, really like a good thing to do is build a portfolio, of just different examples of doing different things. That'll help a ton with like not having any legit, like, you know, high ticket sales experience. If you're trying to get your first role, if you have a little bit of a portfolio where you're like, hey, this is how I would, if I'm applying for appointment setter, this is how I would set the call, and it's like a 3 minute clip of you setting the call with someone. This is how I would pitch the call, and it's a 2 3 minute clip of you pitching the call. Then you have another clip where it's like, this is how I would, you can do the full triage, and then you have another clip that's like, this is how I would do this is how I would kick off the triage. And then you have some interesting things in there where, maybe you do a role play, like you jump on with Carlos and you say, hey, Carlos, give me a hard time when I call you, so you can, pretend like you just called Carlos, and Carlos will be like, hey, what do you want? I got to go. I don't have time. And then like maybe it's a 3 minute clip showing how you dealt with that and got into the triage call anyways. Like, you know what I mean? Just stuff like that to showcase your skill is going to help if you don't have any actual track record behind your name. Cool. Any other
That's great
questions?
advice. Yeah.
I have
Um,
uh,
go ahead. Go ahead. You go ahead first, please.
how did you get this video from your interview? Did you ask your interviewer? This was a mock.
That was
Oh,
Um,
yeah, go ahead, David.
yeah, it was actually, what's it called? Fathom.ai. Just look it up. It's a really easy software to download video from Google Meet or Zoom. And yes, I asked his permission before I recorded. He was completely okay with it.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
just recorded it.
Hi, I had a really interesting question for you. I was just curious because I know you've worked with a lot of people. What would you say is the number one or most limiting belief that you encounter from people trying to break into the remote sales space?
Limiting beliefs specifically.
Yeah.
Um, I'd say the number one limiting belief from people is it depends on like what position they're going for, but usually they're really they have like a lot of fear when it comes to getting started. And they're afraid of like, let's say if they're going for a closer role, the biggest thing that holds them back from closer role is they're like afraid to challenge people. You know, it's one thing, I guess not stopping them from getting started, but it's what stops them from being successful in the role. So they're afraid to just have normal conversations with people. Um, they think they got to do so much training before they get started. Like it's like, yes, there's a lot of skill you need to build. There's a lot of skill to it. It's like, it's just this weird mix where it's like, it's not as easy as a lot of people make it seem, but it's also not as rigid as others make it seem. Like you need to get good and build certain skills, but I think people are believing it's the wrong skills. Like they believe they have to like have a word for word script in front of them. They believe they have to have a specific objection handling word track. They believe that they need to be like exactly like their trainer to be successful, you know? And until they sound exactly like them, they think they're not good enough. Or if they aren't able to close exactly like them, they think they're not good enough. So it's I guess I don't know if I answered the question right, but yeah, I'd say a lot of people just have a lot of wrong beliefs about the industry rather than limiting beliefs. You know, they believe things that aren't necessarily true, you know?
I'm gonna say for me, I made it in my head much difficult than what it actually was. So I think you learn on the roll, you know, you just get started. You're not gonna be perfect, but as you continue, it's gonna be easy and you develop your confidence there. Sometimes you make it worse because you don't know how it is, but you just have to start and see.
Yeah, and like I've done so many call reviews and trained so many people, and one thing that I find myself often trying to teach people the most is like how to be a human being on calls and not a robot. Like I find like a lot of times where I'm just like, hey, when you're talking to your friends, like, would you talk like that? And they're like, no. It's like, well, so what are you doing? You know what I mean? It's a lot of just teaching people how to be human, and just be normal on these calls, like speaking to someone how you would actually speak to them, like having empathy when like someone pours their guts out about something, and then instead of just moving on to the next question on your list, like, oh, okay, well, so how long have you been in this business for? Like instead of just moving on to the next question on your list, taking a moment to be like, oh man, like I'm so sorry to hear that. Like, you know what I mean? And just being a human being is where a lot of people struggle on sales calls because they think they just think they've got to be something different than who they are, you know, or they got to communicate in a way that's not who they are, you know. So yeah, a lot of wrong thinking, a lot of wrong beliefs that hold people back. You know, people thinking, hey, in order to be a closer, I got to be a setter for X amount of time. People thinking like all of these things that maybe someone told them, or you know, or someone coming in the industry being surprised that as an appointment setter, you're gonna dial 80 to 100, maybe more people a day, thinking that like, you know, my set rate should be 60% of the people I dial. Like, you know, they just come in with all of these beliefs and thinkings that are just wrong, you know?
Yeah, you said something on the last call that really surprised me. When me and Powell were talking about kids, and you're just like, "Well, if they hear the kids, just say you have kids. People have kids. That's normal. So what
Yeah.
if they hear kids?" Like, and I was just like, "Okay, wow. I never even like thought about that." So, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of, like, you know, if your kids are in the background, as long as it's not to the point where you can't even hear each other talk, like obviously that people might be like, "Oh my gosh, I can't even hear this guy." But, you know, if your kid pops in the room for a second, you're like, "Oh, you know, I'm busy one sec." Like it's not the end of the world. Like you'll be all right. You know, it's like the person on the other end of the line is usually a grown adult or a kid, or like they're mature enough to realize that yeah, you've got a family, so what, it's not going to ruin your call because you know, like no one's going to be like, oh my gosh, is that a kid, I'm going to hang up, I'm not going to buy from this guy, he's got children. Like, you know, it's okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How would you negotiate salary at the beginning, let's say on an offer. When the terms are not fully clear, let's say they put a range. This
Mhm.
is like, or for the commission also they put a range. Like, how would you negotiate the salary
Yeah,
at the beginning with an offer?
I mean, you just want to ask for it, but it's more about when than how, all right? It's like you want to ask after you get offered the position, because then it's like you got an offer and you're making a counter offer. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But if you're trying to negotiate that like on interview one before they've even decided they want to work with you, then they're just gonna go with someone that's in their mind like less problematic. You know what I mean? They're gonna be like, oh my God, this guy's trying to negotiate stuff. This other guy didn't try to negotiate. I'm gonna pick him. But let them, like, you want to sell them before you try to negotiate, Like you go to the first interview, go to the second interview, now they're hitting you up. They're like, hey Carlos, we want to hire you. Like let's get started. And then you meet with them and negotiate terms from there.
Yeah,
After they
that's
said I
the
want to
part
go
I
where you
mean.
want.
Like after they, yeah. So after they said, how would you negotiate in order to, let's say, get what you want?
Yeah, the way I would do it personally is I would just get on and I would say, hey, I want to just go over all the terms to make sure that we're on the same page for what I'm delivering to you guys and what I'm getting in return. And I just want to make sure that everything is super, super clear. That way we're starting this relationship on the right foot. Sound good? Awesome. And if they gave you like an offer letter, then you could just like go through that and say, hey, I wanted to ask about this and make a proposal. But if they didn't give an offer letter and it was kind of just all up in the air, just say, hey, I know we talked about a range from this to this. I would like mine, like what I was thinking was this. What were your guys' thoughts on where that was going to fall? And see what they say, right? And then also, hey, the commission was this. I would like the commission to be that. Now, if they give a range, obviously there's room to negotiate and stuff like that. Um, a lot of times it's easier to negotiate if there's some give and take with it. And what I mean by that is, hey, if I do this extra thing or if I change this other thing, can I add this thing? Like, for example, hey, let's say you're on an offer where you're a setter with a 1500 base. Be like, hey, if I take a 1K base, can I do 5% commission instead of 3? Like, you know what I mean? At that point, like that's kind of how you want to negotiate. You can give and take a bit. It's easier to negotiate if it's like a solopreneur who you're like, maybe they only have one setter or one closer. You're their first setter or their first closer. Then you can like be a little bit more aggressive with how you negotiate because there's no set standard yet. But with team, like let's say they've got like 10 closers on the team, it's gonna be hard to like come in and say, I want a different
Yeah.
pay structure than everyone else. So it's a little bit
Yeah.
difficult in that sense. So yeah, I mean, for like SDR, account executive, like more salary roles, then you have like, you can negotiate your salary a little bit more. But if you're like, hey, I'm gonna come into this team as the 10th closer, I know every closer gets 10%, but I want 15, that's gonna be difficult for
Mm.
sure. But you can say, hey, if I self-set deals, can I get 15% on those deals? Like, stuff like that. Um, or you can do like performance, like, hey, you can ask, say, hey, what is the average cash collected per month for closers on the team? On average, our closers collect about 100K a month. They make like 10K a month, 10%. Be like, cool. Can I get 12% for every deal after 100K that month? You know what I mean? Maybe negotiate like a higher commission after you've passed a certain threshold. There's lots of different ways to do it. Um, but yeah, it really just depends on the team structure and where the company's at and stuff like that.
Yeah, those were some really good ideas.
Or maybe you can try to negotiate like the first month or some months of your performance. And then you say, okay, if I am on track between like the first and the third month, the first quarter, I would say you guys see me performing and so on and so forth. Would you be open to increase my commission in the month X?
Yeah, that too. Like if you prove yourself, there's so many angles you can take it from. It just depends. I mean, it depends on what you want. Right? Like, are you just looking for more commission? Are you just looking for a bigger base? Are you looking for both? And then you can and then on top of that, it's a combination of what you want and kind of how the team's already functioning. So you just it's kind of like custom per company how you would actually go about it, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, for those, like if they give a range, then yeah, definitely go for the top side of the range once they give you the offer. Like,
Yeah.
you know, if you ask for the top side of the range and they give you like slightly lower, then you know it might be better than what they were gonna offer you if they were gonna offer you the bottom, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, if they offer a range, like you should always just after they
Look
give you
for
the
an
offer,
annual.
like, hey, just to confirm, top side, give me at least, you know.
Yeah.
And see what they say. You know, worst they say is no. And if they offer
Mhm.
you something lower than you're willing to accept, then you walk. If they're offering you something you are willing to accept, then you take it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know, all you can do is try, right? Go for it.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions we got? No, everyone good to go? Awesome. Awesome. Everyone learned something today? All
What's it
Oh yeah.
what's OTE?
on track earnings. Yeah, so just like what the typical person makes. Don't put too much value into OTE. Like obviously the wildly different ones, like if one person's a super high OT versus super low OT, like they make a difference, of course. Um, OTEs are really based on like the integrity of the person who wrote it. You know what I mean? Like if the business owner is very transparent with their OTE, that's good. But there are business owners when you're looking out there that put OTEs that aren't very realistic for their offer. But at the same time, OTEs don't always paint the best picture because your skill set has a lot to do with it. An OTE is supposed to be what is the average that all of this, like you took all the sales teams or all the salespeople on the team, what is like the average that the person makes doing like normal hours, normal amount of outreach, you know, not like the highest outlier or the lowest outlier or whatever. What's like the average on track? Like you're part of the team, you're on track. If the top performer closes at 30% and the worst performer closes at like 22% and everyone else falls somewhere between 25%, like and if everyone takes anywhere from 5 to 6 calls, how much money would you make if you were taking 5 calls and closing at 25%? Like that middle, that should be what the OTE is. Um, does
Does
everyone,
that include base pay?
again, it depends on whether the person's including that in their, like, it depends on the job post, right? Like, it should include the base pay, yeah, but it depends on the job post and what the person writes it as, you know what I mean? So I wouldn't put too much value on it. You can like the OTE, you'll see if it's more legit based off of like what you can see with the company. Like, do they have a social presence? Do they have testimonials and wins? Do they have like structured people on the team? Do they have a sales manager and a CEO, you know? Like obviously you'll see, okay, this team looks like it has a bunch of other closers on it, so the OTE is probably more accurate. But if they're saying, hey, this is the OTE, but you're going to be the first salesperson on the team, then I would just like disregard the OTE. Like I would disregard it unless it's like a really like someone who's has a really good sales process in place. But even then, if it was just the owner taking the calls, it's not necessarily reflective on what you'd close. I've also seen offers where like the OTE they said is 3K a month, but because the salesperson jumping on the team is really good, they ended up making like 6 to 8K on the offer. You know what I mean? So it's not always in the negative. It's not always like, oh, this OTE is lower than they said it is. It's like sometimes it could be higher, sometimes it could be lower because of your skill set and how you perform on the team. The one thing I would ask on the interviews is questions about lead flow, questions about organic presence, questions about, you know, referrals, case studies, reviews. Because if there's a consistent flow of lead flow, I'd ask questions about close rate on live calls. I'd ask questions about show rate, right? Because if there's a good show rate, there's a good close rate, and I would kind of do my own math to see what the OTE is from there, right? Like I'll get on an interview, and again, this is not the first interview. I'd probably do it like on the second interview when they, you know, we're doing like the second round and I'm asking more questions. I'd probably say like, hey, what is the daily lead flow? What is the average cash collected per closed deal up front? What is the close rate on this offer? What is the show rate on this offer? And then I would just do the math, right? Like if they're like, hey, we book 10 calls a week and we have a 80% show rate, that means there's 8 taken calls. And if they're like, we have a 20% close rate on shown calls, that means they close I don't know, whatever 20% of 8 is, right? Like 1 point something. So let's say they close one deal a week. And then if they say we've got a 10K offer and you get 10% commission, they probably don't piff everything and you get paid on cash collected. So let's say they have like a 50% average cash collected. So that means upfront, usually in a week, they'll collect 5 grand and then they've got some payment plans. So then you get paid over time with the payment plans. So then you'll know the commission is usually about 1,000 to 1,500 per week, or maybe like, or sorry, 500 to like 700 something per week. And then, X that by 4 and you'll say, okay, that's probably the OTE, right? But again, if they're like, hey, you'll be taking more calls than that, then you just do kind of the math, right? So I'd always, 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 and if you guys are like doing interviews and getting this information, you need help with calculating it, I'm happy to help you calculate it. But I would always be like, okay, how many calls am I going to be taking? What's the show rate? What's the close rate? What's the average cash collected upfront per deal? And then what's like, just do the math, You had a question, Joseph?
On Rep Select, if I select the lowest OTE, does that automatically exclude the offers that are more higher?
Like in terms of like filtering when you're looking for jobs?
Yeah.
Yeah. You get whatever you select. So you can select multiple, right? When you're searching for jobs. So if you're just looking for any job, just leave it blank and it'll show all of them. Cool. Any other questions? Sweet. Awesome. Well, for those of you that are on closer calls, I'll see you Wednesday. Last time I had some busy stuff. Apologize for not being there on Wednesday, but I'm going to be there this time, and then we'll have Friday's call. And then the last week of the month, I'll just let some of you guys know since you're here, from the 23rd to the 30th, I'm going to be away. So there won't be calls that week. I think, Julia, you're going to be away as well. But I'm going to be away. I'm going to be in Mexico with my wife's family, which is going to be interesting because none of them speak any English.